Record. Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today we're definitely gonna have some fun, man. I love it. We're five on five fun. Uh, we're gonna bring on my friend Sandy, and we're gonna talk about leadership, really mindset. We're gonna talk about so many different things. And he's an author, a three-time author, public speaker. Can't wait to talk to him. How are you doing today, Sandy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for show. Appreciate it.
All right, yeah, no, I loved it. I love your topics, and really, when you start talking about about the mental edge, I think we all have to have that mental edge about it. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I am a retired hockey player, and when my career was over, I spent about 10 years as a coach. So mostly at the collegiate and Olympic levels, doing on ice work with most players. And really exclusively got into the mindset space probably about 10-ish years ago. And I say that word mindset because my personal opinion, from anytime you hear that word mental performance, I think the insinuation is that something is wrong with you or that you're broken and with broken people. So anytime I say mindset, um, kind of the big seven for me are belief, attitude, and grit, focus, emotional control, discipline, self-awareness. So I spend most of my time, our business, um, with customized programming for predominantly athletes, a lot of pros, but also a lot of non-pros, and really helping them maximize their potential through mindset development, confidence, belief, um, and wrote a couple of books about it. Do a lot of speaking, and just really get excited by it, trying to make a positive difference. So really excited by it.
Yeah, no, because mindset, right? It's a word that today people are using all over, right? It's mindset, but it really is. I mean, between the ears, it really the game could be won and lost, and it doesn't have to be a game. It could, the life, corporate, and even
Yep.
just even living ourselves, right?
I think it's the foundation of the building, right?
Mhm.
If you think about it that way, um, I think so many people use the phrase mental toughness as something defensive, right? Like when or if it starts to go wrong, whatever it is, how do we kind of bounce back? And the work that we do, mindset really takes the opposite approach, right? Mindset is the foundation. So whatever you're trying to stack on top of it, I don't pick the profession,
Yep,
athlete, doctor, whatever it is, just anybody. Those core beliefs, right? The foundation of your building, how to think, when to think it, um, that is the foundation of everything because adversity is coming for us all, right?
for sure.
And so we spend a lot of our time helping top tier athletes and high performers, but also the past 5 years or so have a lot of time kind of with the younger generation, um, helping them learn the foundation.
Yeah, I think with the younger generation, right? They don't know because they don't teach it in school. They don't even, some of that foundation isn't always done. And and today's youth leagues, they're doing a good job in a lot of ways, but some of that mindset, right, with the walk up songs and all that stuff when you're little, you're
It's a
losing the
different
focus.
time
Yep,
than
for
when you
sure.
and I were younger.
Yep,
It's a different time. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I would say maybe the athletes or performers way back when maybe were a little bit grittier by nature. It was probably more of a cultural thing. Um, I think now definitely the talent is more premium.
sure.
But I do think that resiliency and grit piece, which can be taught, I do think that that's not quite as prevalent in a lot of younger people today. For some of them, right, it's not their fault. I talk to parents all day long, and right, the challenge, right, once you have kids, you want your kids to have a better, easier life than you had, right? But
Sure.
there's a fine line. So sometimes my message to parents is, it's it's not about preventing the fall. It's about teaching to get back up.
Yep.
Um, because the fall is not necessarily failure, and we all fall. I don't know any high performers or anybody that hasn't had adversity or failure. But it's what you do with that, I think, that's really important.
100%. I think that's really one of the big lessons that we need to kind of keep pushing out there is falling is okay.
Yeah,
Falling and not succeeding. Sometimes you learn and you should learn from even the wins, but it's easy to when you win something, it's so easy
yeah,
to look at it. Whereas when you fall, it takes a tougher mindset to really dive into it. I mean, some of my biggest failures in life have led to some of the greatest successes that I've had
that's
because I
right.
learned what not to do, why I did why I made those choices at the time, and why I thought they were good at the time, and learning from those.
Which they may have been. They may have been, and you know, I think a couple things with that. I agree with what you said 100%. Most of the people that I interact with, one of the first questions I ask them, whether it's an athlete or a leader or whatever, is help me understand what success means. You don't have to map out your life for me, but um, I don't know if you are performing well or not, if you're playing well or not, but if there isn't a target, if we don't have the picture of what
Yeah,
success means, that's problematic, not just because you can't celebrate it, you can't readjust or recalibrate if you need to, but because sometimes we start going down those rabbit holes that what we think is failure, I don't know if it's failure. Maybe we just don't have specific of a direction. But the journey, the actions and behaviors, those are always the best places to start that lead to the outcomes that we want. But I agree with you 100% that failure is a part of the process. And I think anybody that thinks they are the only one who has that chapter, everybody has that chapter,
yep, yeah. And you
right?
can't. You have to embrace it a little bit.
Yeah.
Not being happy about it. See, embracing and happy about something are two separate things. You could,
Yep.
really when you're a high performer, you want to win. I mean, for
You
me,
know what I think the difference is though. It's been my experience. The difference is right because everybody has the lows. I think the higher performers, if you took the DNA component that a lot of them share, is they move very, very quickly to the reset and to the what now.
mm,
They're not dwelling in the moment or in the result of something that they don't like. They are able to reset and really kind of get into that, well, now what, right? Like something has to happen now so that we can continue to move through things. And I think those folks maintained certainly athletes, but in any aspect of life, I don't think the goal. All of us as humans, I think we go through that process where we think we have to get over something. You might not ever get over things, but you do have to get through them.
sure.
And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and that is a very big distinction because getting over something is well, either way, it's in the past, but getting over it doesn't mean when you're thinking about it,
Yeah.
that's the focus. And I think that's where, before you were talking about and whatever you're doing, you have to be able to see it. So no matter what, in the corporate world, you have to be able to see the changes or where you're going to go. Horseback riding, one of my daughters was riding horseback riding, and when you make a turn in horseback riding, the rider has to look that way before the horse goes.
Yep.
And it's like that with anything. I mean, you'll have a few ideas, but even a quarterback, right? Patrick Mahomes, he knows where he's throwing it. Just because it looks like he's throwing it behind his back, he just knew how to get it there. Uh,
Sometimes we all go through that. I had someone I didn't come up with this. I wish that I did, but I can't take credit for it. Um, Someone said when we were talking about this topic of like what are the goals or what would success be or let's define it so then we can kind of back into it. They almost suggested that without that, it would be as odd as you just getting into your car and just driving, right? And like 10 minutes later, if I'm the passenger in your car, I'm saying, "Well, where are we going?" And you're like, "I have no idea." Like, and when you frame it like that, well, of course no one would
Right.
do that, right? So I do think having a target, which I don't even think that we ever fully get there, but it's a direction, right? Because we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. But you got to
Yeah.
be able to see that mountaintop off in the distance that says, you know
Sure.
what, we're headed in that direction. And I think that's important.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned a word that I always like to play with, perfection, right? There's so many people who want perfection. What do you think about the word perfection?
I well, obviously it's very very troublesome. I rarely use it. What it signals to me though, I think when people are living in that normal, they are very aware of outside factors, how they're being viewed, how they're being judged, um, how other people see them, what are they going to say. So a lot of times I don't really think it's chasing the perfection. It's they think that's the safe place to chase the consequences of not being perfect,
Mm,
right? Of not being judged or evaluated. It's very hard. But the big thing for us is always actions and behaviors that everybody wants outcomes. Outcomes are, of course, important, but you have a decision on where you're going to place the focus. You either place your focus on the actions and behaviors that when and if you do them, they lead to the outcomes. That those are controllables. Those are very powerful. Or, right, we just kind of get stuck in that outcome based, which for many of us, myself included sometimes, right, we start to see things as very black and white. It's good or bad. We won or we lost. And I don't think that's fair.
yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's why I say, perfection. Perfection is just a one moment of time, right? It's not a forever. I mean, you throw a perfect game in baseball, right? The next game, they don't go, okay, you get to add on to that.
That's right.
It's pitch one, back to pitch one.
Yep.
And that perfection, that's where people, put that level and that extra pressure on themselves when they don't need it.
They don't,
You
they
know,
don't. It's a very hard skill. Younger people struggle with this, I think, more, and it's easy to understand. But really, imagine if everyone was leading a life of the goal being we just want to get 1% better today.
right.
Imagine if every day was just 1% better, right? Because the easiest numbers is, well, after 30 days, you're going to be 30% better. So it's a lot of it is, well, who are we comparing out to? And that concept of focus, which I think is a number one for the work that I do. And I think the misunderstanding is that a lot of people think that word means to block out, when
Mm,
really what focus means is to lock in, block the things out. We're trying to get the good stuff and lock it in, keep it narrow. Um, and those are hard things to do, but when you put that together, I think those are the ingredients that lead to everybody just trying to maximize their own potential. You're going to be judged or evaluated. It has nothing to do with you. Some people might say, hey, that person's great at their job or that person stinks at baseball. You can't control those people, but the only
right.
thing that you can control are your controllables.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's always easier, as somebody who played baseball a lot in earlier, all the people who are in the stands who, oh, come on, that was an easy pitch. I mean, and I've been guilty of saying that as well,
Oh, yeah.
but when you get to that level, those curveballs really curve, and the fastballs are, the fastballs I was always okay with. I don't care how, I got to a level where I saw some real heat, didn't always connect at that time, but the curveballs, man, that made me kind of sit right here where I'm at.
And what a lot of people I think don't understand being on both sides of it for me as a player, an athlete playing in front of the big crowd and then being in the big crowd evaluating is those high performers, they can handle pressure. They handle pressure in a different way. It's not just the curveballs, as you would say, but it's hitting the curveball or stepping in front of 50,000 people. That's when you start to see, gosh, the difference between a lot of these people is they have that switch, and when they flip it, they are all in on the current moment, right? They're dialed into their controllables. Um, and those people have to be action and behavior focused, not outcome focused.
Right. And a lot of that is trained behavior, right? I'm going to ask you
Yeah,
because that way when you're in a situation you almost don't think about it, right? The infamous story of Joe Montana, oh, isn't that John Candy? Right,
that's right. In the huddle, in the huddle.
right,
That's right.
like you know to be able to do that, and there's other athletes that do that, but is to notice the moment, and how do you stay in the moment when you teach or when you were playing?
There are definitely some verbal cues that you can use, some phrases, what now or now what. That is a big one. A lot of athletes do that to kind of stay right in the now. Um, Action-based thoughts and keeping it very, very simple. Um, and you hear baseball players do it all the time. If they go into a slump, um, something that they always say is, "I'm just trying to keep it simple, right? I'm just trying to hit this ball with this bat. I'm not minimizing the skill involved, but when people are struggling, you notice that they get narrower and narrower. So if they're doing that because things aren't good and they're trying to make them better, when we start living a life that is really just reminding ourselves of those details and those actions, focus lines up. You start to feel a little bit more confident about yourself. You believe more. And a good, confident, believe rich person is I would put my money on that person every day other than the person that is struggling with a little bit of anxiety and not meeting the moment. So it could be a verbal cue, but you can't you got to have the discipline to not let your mind run. You got to keep it very narrow
Yeah, and that's applied across the board, not
for
only in
everything.
sports. Yeah,
Sure.
you think about it, our worst enemies a lot of times is in our head, because we're all doing that. And that's where when I coach people, one of the things I say about, like, Pete Rose had said, you never change your swing. He goes, if the swing got you there, just keep swinging. You can move in the batter's box a little bit, but don't even try to think about that too often.
I love that. I love that. I would add one caveat to that
Mhm.
that I think is helpful for people is remembering that thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are just thoughts. Just because you think it doesn't mean that it's going to happen, doesn't mean that it did happen, doesn't mean that that person's saying that about you. The amount of time that we as humans spend running that tape forward to a negative place when there's there's no evidence yet to support that that would happen. So remembering that thoughts are just thoughts. They're almost like suggestions in your brain. You can choose to absorb them or you can choose to reject them. But think about how much time we all spend in the negative what ifs. What if it
Right.
doesn't work out? What if I look stupid? What if I fail? Well, I love when people play the what if game, but I always ask why if we're going to play it, why don't we play it to the positive?
Yep.
We don't know, but what if it does work out? What if this is the best business decision you've ever made? What if it's the best new hire? What if this becomes the best game you've ever played? I don't know if it's going to happen, but you don't either, you
Yeah,
know?
it's again being in that now, because just let the ball come to you, like, let the puck come to you, and give it your best shot, and and that's where that sweet spot when I talk about the swinging of the bat is if you did the best that you could do. I mean, you're a ball player, and if you hit the ball, the puck, or anything, the best that you could do, it doesn't matter with the results. The results, sometimes you did the best shot that you could do. It's caught, right? The goalie will catch it. something will happen. It'll be a line drive to the shortstop. That
I
doesn't
was
mean that you,
talking. It's so funny you just said that. I was talking to a player about literally about an hour ago. This is shout out to her. She actually just got drafted in the PWHL last night. And, I mean, she's a professional athlete, Olympian, just insanely talented. And she was talking about she feels like she's in a little bit of a scoring slump. She was playing some pickup hockey or whatever she's doing, some training. And she was saying how she didn't think she was playing well. Nothing was going in. She was just ripping the puck and nothing was going in. Um, and she was equating that to she's not shooting well. And I said, I don't know if you were shooting well or not, but is it possible that the goalie just made an amazing save? Right? Because, like you in practice, you spend all your time trying to score goals. And I just reminded her, she knows this. I said, what do you think the goalie practices
right?
during practices stopping you from scoring goals? So it doesn't mean that it wasn't a great shot. Maybe it was a great shot. Didn't like the outcome, but I'll always take my chances on trying to repeat enough good shots rather than not taking them and thinking that all of a sudden my shot is terrible. It both can be true. Good shot, great save.
Right, right, and sometimes a great shot will also be stopped by a great save, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean
Yeah.
that's why when I talk about the with baseball, the balance. If you're too far ahead, you're not gonna have enough power. Too far behind, you're gonna pop it up because you're gonna be behind. And the same thing with shooting a puck, right? It has
Yeah.
to be timing, and it's
I would say
all
that Ken Griffey Jr. robbed a lot of people of great hits. He
for
just
sure.
made even better catches, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, to kind of get down on yourself, yeah, you always want to develop, make sure you're doing the best that you can, but sometimes someone else just had a terrific result. Um, but I think if anything, that is a reminder to keep grinding and to keep focusing on those things that you can control, because eventually when you stack enough of those great todays together, you end up where you want to be,
100%.
right?
Now, so I guess you flipped the switch, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about
Yep.
one of your programs, the flip the switch. Because so how do you suggest? So some of it was language, which we already talked a little bit about. What are some other tools that people can flip the switch when they're working in any environment?
Well, I think the first thing, the concept of flip the switch is that there has to be a time for an athlete. Maybe it's when they arrive at the stadium or the rink or the court, or when they're in the locker room, or if you're, show up at a job, that there has to be a moment when you are flipping the switch and you are not trying to turn the daytime version of yourself off. This is very important. You're trying to turn on compete mode or performance mode, right? There's a big difference. We're not trying to block out problems at home or problems in school or the stresses, my car is busted up, whatever it is. We're trying to turn on performance or compete mode. And for most people, the place to start with that is, well, what does that person look like?
Hmm.
How do they act? How do they move? Are they confident? Are they loud? If it's an athlete, or do they are they super aggressive? Like, you have to actually define it. We're almost creating a character that when you flip that switch, you are in that character until it is time to flip that switch off. It's very, very important. So, number one, there has to be a time or a setting, a decision has to be made. You have to have a clear picture of what or who that version of yourself is. And once you do that, the third part is spending time, all of your time, reminding yourself, not trying to convince yourself, right? Reminding yourself of the actions, not trying to convince yourself that you can.
That's huge, right? That
Huge.
yeah, yeah, because when you're talking about that, I think of the movie. It's a little dated, over the top with
Come on.
Sylvester.
I got it.
Yep,
I
yep.
got it.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, right, because whenever he was this truck
Yep.
driver,
When he
but
turned the hat
when
around.
he turned the hat around, he actually you could see he flipped the switch. He acted into that part, and that is because it's again that vision to see something different. The outcome was different, and you can be who you want, but there's times you need to kick it up into gear, right? No matter what you
Do you
do.
ever do you ever see any of the YouTube clips of, you know, hockey players or football or anybody, basketball players mic'd up, and like some of the things they're saying are they are horrific, right? I mean, they're always in people's ears. They're talking a lot of trash. Um, Anytime I speak to a younger person and they, oh yeah, yeah, I heard that. I said, I mean, do you think that that person is like walking around their neighborhood, like kicking puppies and knocking babies over? Like
Right.
it's a character, right? That's
Yeah.
compete mode. And but what separates, I think, the great from the average is that when they flip that switch, they know exactly who they are. They do everything as if they are that character and they are all in.
Yep.
And some people call it alter egoing. You can give the thing a name, and it's almost like you're wearing a mask, and maybe that's comforting. But when that switch is flipped, you have to be all in on the
Yeah.
actions.
Right, because I think that's where your focus is, right?
Yep.
That's the intention. Because it's easy to say focus, right? Use these big words, but it's the intention behind the action that we want. And that's how when I work with somebody, that's what I did. I was working with a lot of golfers for a while, and I go, I don't really
Nice.
care, and it's one of those things that that's why when they talk about perfection, I'm like, if you're 5 feet or 7 feet from the cup, yeah, it's 2 extra feet, but does it really matter? It's getting online with the cup, and then you can figure it out. Because we practice enough. 5 or 7 doesn't really matter. You
Yeah.
know,
And trusting yourself,
right,
reminding yourself, getting nervous is normal. Everybody gets nervous. But standing over that putt and reminding yourself that I've sunk 30,000 of these putts. I can think back to a time when I read this green rate. I know I can do it. As soon as even that thought enters your body, you're almost creating like a mental highlight reel for yourself of times when you have been successful before.
right.
Almost like you're watching highlights on Sports Center. When people have those highlight reels, whatever the profession is, I always ask people this. I said, "Do you have a moment like that? Maybe it was a speech you gave where you knocked it dead, and or a great business meeting that you had, and you have that adrenaline." And I said, "Do you remember that?" And they said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." I said, you remember the details, like you go back to that moment, right? Like, how does that feel?" And they always say, "Oh, it feels so great. I'm ready to go right now." And I said, "Well, do you know what that feeling's called? That feeling's called confidence.
Yeah.
But the way that you got there was through belief, tapping into belief." And the last thing I would say on that is I read this somewhere. Absolutely love it. If you want to know the difference between those two words, because everybody is chasing the feeling of being confident. If you think about a tree outside, what you see above ground, that's confidence. What you don't see below ground, that's belief.
Mm,
So in the example of that tree, right? Like no roots, no tree. Well, no belief, no confidence.
yep.
Tap into the belief.
Yeah. So, what are some of the biggest mistakes that high performers make when things start to go wrong?
Well, the highest of high performers, what makes them high performers is their ability to focus or to reset or to adapt. I think
Mhm.
those are the three big ones. But if you said what kind of separates that group from everybody else, you mentioned some of these words. They're insanely intentional. They're very, very purpose driven. Um, and they tend to deal a lot in specifics. Specifics in, get specifics out. And for most of those people, they're dialed in with their discipline. They understand the difference between want and need. I don't want to do that. Well, but I need to, right?
Yeah,
Those performers don't really struggle with that. And I often ask people, I say, in 3 months or 5 months, fill in this sentence. In 5 months, or next season, I want to blank. And then sentence number two is, so right now I need to blank, right? Like they almost write their own plan.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's the separator. So the understanding of want and need, the higher performers really seem to be more on the need base and not so much on the want base.
Yeah, no, I remember reading something about Pete Sampras, right? Who was at one point number one tennis
Stud.
player in the world, right? Stud, complete. But when he was number one, he said to his coach, "How do I get better?" They're like, "Well, rankings, you're number one." He goes, "No, no, no. What do I have to give up to become even better?"
That's right.
Yeah. So, it's sometimes the things that we have to lose or improve at, right? It's not that you have to lose anything or give up anything. There's areas in our lives that we
That's right.
need to improve at or enhance even.
That's right. There's an amazing documentary if you haven't seen it. We just saw it the other night on Netflix. It's called Rafa.
Mm,
It's unreal. It's unreal. I didn't know that much about him, but from a discipline standpoint and what he went through with his injuries at a very, very early age and being able to find another gear, being able to kind of see the path through the trees from a discipline standpoint at the end of the documentary or the series, it is so easy to understand how he accomplished what he accomplished because look he did and the sacrifices the amount of attention to detail. If you want to know what a high performer looks like, just watch that documentary and it's like, holy cow.
yeah, no, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, we used Tiger Woods, right? Tiger Woods,
There you go.
right? Another guy who just would throw it, bucket out, throw it wherever it would be, and he'd have to hit it.
Yep.
And you prepare for the things that you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's part of preparation in leadership is preparing no matter what's going to happen. What are you going to do? Because how do I guess that really goes to how do the performers, how do the performers that you work with reset mentally after a mistake, right? Bill Buckner was an example. That could have
It's
crushed
terrible.
him. It could have crushed him, and it did in a lot of ways, but he didn't allow it to crush him. He still went out the next season. Eventually the weight of society is gonna, carry to you. But what
Their
would you?
their 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 ability to reset and be focused on the next play, not because they are not thinking about anything that happened before, but it's what I said earlier. They're not trying to get over things. It's not like that memory goes away. My sister sadly lost her husband 4 years ago, and I remember her going through the grieving process, and she was saying, I'm never going to get over this, but I do have to get through it.
Mm,
And that is, I think that most high performers share that they're not trying to get over things. They are trying to get through things, and to remember that no one's defined by the last play, the last like it's just a moment in
yeah,
time.
right.
And I think a lot of high performers who are always chasing the best or improvement or development or more, not like in abundance, but more achievement or more whatever, they understand that relationship of want and need. They need to do X, Y, and Z because they want to do something. I think other people may be less disciplined saying, well, I don't really want to do that, so I guess I don't need to do that.
Yep. Yeah,
The
we get
higher
make
performers, they don't have that conversation. They understand that habits and repetition, the consistency, that's what equals achievement.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why 2 months ago I had a unexpected went to a cardiologist, had found out I had a huge blockage,
Ugh,
and I had a stent put in. And but what the doctors are talking to me and they go, "You're gonna have to change your diet." I go, "It's done." And they go, "No, no, no, serious. Don't take this seriously." I go, "No, it's done." I go, "Watch." When I come back for the change, and in 2 months, without any of the pills and all that. That's a different conversation. But 17 pounds. I reduced it. I eliminated
Oh, good for
17
you.
pounds, man. I changed my diets. I'm eating stuff that I never thought I'd eat. But hey, man, I knew, and it's that knowledge. Look, I knew Big Macs weren't gonna be good for me, but
But
I
you
was like,
wanted them.
I wanted it, man,
I
and
get it. I get
and
it.
and I was like, I'm willing to take that risk, right? And I didn't think it was gonna be me, right? It's gonna be you. It's gonna be the other one, and hey, man, when they tell you 98%, man, guess what? It's me. And I'm like, all right, done. That
Yep.
doesn't mean I'm never going to have another one if I want one, but it ain't going to be for a while because I want to make sure that I'm back there. That, they laugh at me when I go to rehab and they're like, I'm one of the young guys and I look young, which I'm blessed about. But all the old guys are like, man, he's making us run crazy. I go, look, I don't want to be where you are. When I get to
That's
your
right.
age, respectfully, I don't want to say I have to catch up and do what I do. I'm doing it now. So that way I can, when
Yeah.
it's time, it's my time.
Yep.
Now,
That's totally true.
yeah. What type of mindset do you create? There are people who want the ball at the end, right? Michael Jordan, right, failed the most times in basketball at the end of a game, but we'll all remember all the shots that he took at the end as
That's
well, right?
exactly right. If you look, that's exact. I use analogies like this all the time. Him shooting whatever it was, 40% from
Yeah,
whatever it was, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's the greatest player ever." The other side of that is, well, he missed 60% of the time, or for batting average, if you're hitting 300,
you're missing. Yeah,
you're missing the other 7 out of 10 times.
correct.
So a lot of it's perspective. But I think a lot of those people, they're not chasing the stats. They know that the stats will be the end, the culmination of the work. So their focus is on the work.
Hmm.
Where I think, a lot of people in today's day and age, everything's so immediate. Everybody's chasing the stats, but those guys are the perfect example of it. Hockey, whatever,
Yeah,
whether you like him or not, Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time. And
correct.
until about 7 or 8 years ago, he used to lead the league almost every year in two categories. People always say goals, of course. A lot of people say hits. It wasn't hits. It was shots. Shots. So you take his numbers without being too boring and you kind of add it up. He maybe gets 500 shots a season. If he scored 50 goals a year, that number is like a protected benchmark in hockey. Like that's godlike
Yeah.
for a season. And everybody celebrates that. Well, the other way to look at that is, well, the greatest goal scorer of all time, who just got 50 goals this year, he scores about 10% of the time. So he didn't score the other 90%. And he's the greatest goal scorer of all time, right?
Right.
So it's just keep shooting. So I think that's the thing in life is keep whatevering, right? Because it's just a numbers game. You keep growing, but you focus on the after Ovechkin would have a bad game, one of the things he always used to look at is the data, shots. And he knew, well, it's about 5, 6 shots a game. And if he wasn't getting 5, 6 shots a game, normally it wasn't the outcome that he wanted. So he focused on the input because he knew the output wasn't what he wanted. And I think that's very important for whoever it is. Focus on the input.
Yep, you got to focus on exactly because you could practice all day long, but if you're practicing wrong, right? 1 plus 1 will never equal 5. You could practice that all day long, memorize it backwards and forwards, but it's doing the right things. What does it take to become unshakable under pressure? Because we've been talking about all this, but there's that moment again, that hold up. It's my turn to take that last shot. Like just with the Knicks, we knew who was taking the last shot. We didn't know all
Yep.
the other stuff that was going to go on, but you knew who was going to take the shot. And
If you had to ask me, the boring answer is that it is focus because focus then leads to calmness it leads to confidence, it leads to trust. But if you had to say, what is the difference to really be unshakable? What separates, I think, unshakable people is that their ability to lock in is unbreakable. It doesn't mean that they don't have fears. It doesn't mean that they don't have anxiety, but they are wired to say, I'm going to go anyway. Fear doesn't mean stop, fear means go,
Mhm.
because they have the data inside, the routines to be able to look back and remind themselves of past successes. And they don't let any of the negative what ifs seep in. Like they're Michael Jordan was not thinking, what if I miss? What are the people going to say?
Right.
That was not going through his mind. He was thinking like the exact opposite. I want the ball, not oh my gosh, I feel pressure. No, he felt opportunity and
And that's
right,
that alone is right. You're
huge.
seeing the opportunity is, like when I work with people, I go, well, if you're going to doubt something, why don't you doubt the doubts? Right. That's the
I
easiest
love
thing.
that. I love
Is if
that.
you doubt the doubts, how many times have you ever been successful? Oh yeah, plenty of times. Okay, then you know, even if it's no matter what the percentage, all you need is this one time.
Yep.
And in sports and things like that, just doubt the doubts.
And I think it's reps. I mean, if you,
Yeah.
any of the best of the best, you heard about Kobe's ridiculous travel things,
Yep.
Yarmir Yager. I mean, no one had to tell them to get extra reps. They just it became so ingrained. They practiced the pressure so much that it really didn't become pressure. It became comfort.
Yep.
I mean, and just think about that. It's like the Navy SEALs talk about that all the time. That people say, "Gosh, their like reactions are so good." They practice so much that their reactions are a trained response. Like it's almost unthinkable to understand that. Like they're not reacting. Their reaction is something that they've done so many times. That is a response.
Right.
And that's why when it counts,
Those are the guys you
those
want.
are the guys you want, you know?
Now you've given us a lot of things to think about and a lot of things. I usually have everybody walk into my little magic garden to give one more piece of advice before we leave. Do you have something that you'd like to share with us?
Um, yeah, I will. You kind of rattled the memory talking about golf earlier because I am sometimes guilty of this on the golf course, but everybody has, taken that shot or missed that putt, and the next words that come out of your mouth are not great words about yourself,
Hmm.
right? We've all done it. We've all been there. And we spend a lot of time talking about positive self talk and how we see ourselves. I think it's critically important. So I always remind people that if you would not say it to somebody else, you cannot say it to yourself. Like we might get on the golf course, like that shot stunk, but you wouldn't come off the court or the field and be like, "That's the worst play I've ever seen. Beat it. You shouldn't be on this team." You'd, "Hey, let's go. We'll get them next time. We'll pick it back up here." Well, if you wouldn't say it to somebody else, you cannot be saying it to yourself. You can't even be thinking it.
Yep. No, 100%. Yeah. No, I agree. And the golf is one of the sports that it's the only sport that I picked up and I wasn't competitive on. Like and not the ability. I didn't care. I was like, I'm walking through
Yep.
the grass. I don't care
Sunny outside and with
because you've played with so many different people, and most people are at my level, right? Some are better, and that's okay. Uh, for the effort that I'm putting into it, but most of the people who are playing all the time are at my level. I'm like, all right, if I don't
yep.
have to try and I'm already here, I'm having a good time, and I don't play as often as I'd like. How can everybody find you?
SandyCohan.com. That's where a lot of my books are, a lot of speaking information. My primary business is a business called Mental Edge Hockey.
Mhm.
But SandyCohan.com on Instagram, it's Sandy Cohan Official. Um, and love chatting with people, any business sector or sports, because as you said earlier, this is relevant to everybody.
For sure.
Um, and I bet you'd probably agree. I certainly didn't know how to do this stuff when I was younger. I wish that I did. It was either ingrained by a coach who maybe wasn't saying the best things, or I didn't say it's right, but it really wasn't until I became a pretty high level athlete and then really kind of started studying it. But sandycohan.com.
Okay, yeah, no, no, and finish that sentence. Yeah, we need to kind of teach our young kids. When we started off to do these things because it not
Absolutely.
only applies in sports. We're only doing it in sports, then it's okay. It's still not okay, truthfully, but because it applies to everything else that you do. Because being an elite player is still a small amount of people, no matter how many expansion teams. But guess what?
Yep.
Being a human in society is so much more. If you show up that way, the rest of it
David,
becomes easy.
David, I tell parents this all the time that I at this stage of my life, I did not know this when I first started this a long time ago. I was mostly working with professional athletes at that time, but at this stage of my life, I really feel like I am in the help build better human being business. For
Mm.
me, the primary, like, hockey or sports are just the vehicle. But if at the end of the day, someone can walk into a boardroom in 15 years and understand all of those concepts and they maximize their potential and they believe in themselves, that's a win. In my book, honestly, at this stage, I think that's the win. So I do think it's an integral part of people's development.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, buddy. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
And for everybody else, we thank them also for listening. But we wish you peace and love as your foundation. And when you bring a bat, bring those awesome thoughts like Sandy brought for us today. And I hope you hit your sweet spot. Thanks so much.